Happy Monday, everybody. Hope you're all doing well as we get into the second week of Final Fantasy. And this weekend we had the Pro Tour, so we'll be talking about what happened in the Pro Tour. Basically, a lot of mono red and Izzet Prowess. And as far as the best of one meta goes, we're going to see a lot of a stable meta, right? We're going to see not a lot of changes. So I expect this episode is going to be a little bit faster than the other episodes. So, because, people have been complaining about Standard being kind of stale for a while, right? The thriving memes and such, right? But this is the first week that I really feel like you'll see what I mean. It feels a little bit different than the rest of the weeks. So, Mono Red Aggro is number 1 according to Untapped, which is a third-party tracker, and is in Tier 1. And if we compare it to last week, we can see that there's no changes to the list. It is favored against Izzet Prowess, Azorius Omniscience, and Azorius Control. It's a coin flip against Mono Black Midrange, and it's weak to Rakdos Aggro. The opening hand, you're looking for the Heartfire Hero, the Manifold Mouse, the Monstrous Rage, and the Emberheart Challenger. Number 2, according to Untapped, is Rakdos Aggro, also in Tier 1. And if we compare it to last week, we can see that there are no changes to the list. This archetype is favored against Izzet Prowess, Azorius Omniscience, and Mono Red Aggro. It is weak against Mono Black Midrange. And the opening hand, you're looking for Heartfire Hero, the Emberheart Challenger, the Monstrous Rage, and Turn Inside Out. And the Manifold Mouse is good to have too. In third place, also in Tier 1, is Mardu Aggro. And if we compare this one to last week, we see no changes. And this is what I kind of mean by, like, it's been a while since I've started off with no changes listed for everything, right? And it's going to be all the way like this, all the way to number 8. So, Mardu Aggro is favored against Izzet Prowess and Mono Red Aggro. It's a coin flip against Azorius Omniscience and Rakdos Aggro. And the opening hand, you're looking for the Heartfire Hero, the Sheltered by Ghosts, the Optimistic Scavenger, and the Manifold Mouse. And then Boros Auras, similar to how like Rakdos Aggro doesn't really have black, Mardu Aggro doesn't really have black. They're just kind of variations whether or not they have the fling. And so Boros Auras is a number 4 according to Untapped, also in Tier 1. And if we compare it to last week, has no changes. And this one's favored against Izzet Prowess and Mono Red Aggro. And the opening hand, you're looking for the Heartfire Hero, the Sheltered by Ghosts, the Optimistic Scavenger, and Manifold Mouse. Number 5, according to Untapped, is Azorius Omniscience, also in Tier 1. If we compare it to last week, we see no changes. It is favored against Mono Black Midrange, is a coin flip against Izzet Prowess, Mono Red Aggro, and Mardu Aggro, and it is weak against Rakdos Aggro. The opening hand, you're looking for the Omniscience, Abuelo's Awakening, the Philology Archaeologist, if you're running it, and the Roiling Dragonstorm. Number 6, according to Untapped, is Mono White Lifegain and is in Tier 2, which means it's a standard deviation below the other 5. It's still a very viable deck, and it has some bad matchups. If we compare it to last week's list, we can see that there are no changes. It is favored against Izzet Prowess, Mono Red Aggro, and its opening hand, you're looking for the Leyline of Hope. Essence Channeler is a particularly nice one. The Hinterland Sanctifier for the ETB life gains. And then the Knight Errant of Eos is performing a little bit better this week if you are running the lists that were running the Knight Errant of Eos. Otherwise, you're looking for other enablers like the Leonin Vanguard. The Knight Errant of Eos helps you refill after Wraths. Number 7, according to Untapped, is Selesnya Rabbits, and if we compare this one to last week, we also see no changes, and there are no matchups available for this yet because relatively low sample size, although if you do want to look up the matchup data, I did post in the community tab at the end of Tarkir Dragonstorm. So not much has changed in the meta, so I assume the matchup data is the same. The opening hand, you're looking for the Valley Might Caller, the Seasoned Wearing Guard, the Valley Quest Caller, and Phineas Ace Archer. And number 8 is Mono Black Midrange. We actually have to go back to week 7 of Tarkir when I talked about Mono Black Midrange last. It's been being kicked out of the top 8 because of Azorius Omniscience, but we're seeing less Azorius Omniscience. I think people just get tired of playing the combo, and so Mono Black Midrange has snuck into the top 8 this week. And it is in tier 2, though. It does have some difficult matchups. And if we compare it to the list that I talked about in week 7 of Tarkir, we can see that they've dropped 1 copy of the Bloodlighter of Aclazotz, as well as dropped the 2 copies of the Mishra's Foundry. Mishra's Foundry, as I've mentioned before, is better against mono red. Not a huge deal, but if you are playing up against a lot of mono red, it can matter that it's a little bit faster than the Soulstone Sanctuary. So this one's bringing in 2 copies of the Soulstone Sanctuary, which works a little bit better in the mid game because it gives you additional demons. Since it counts as all creature types, it helps satisfy having the Unholy Annex. And this one's also bringing in 1 more swamp. We've seen kind of this fluctuate between 24 and 25 lands. So nothing. If you're going to bring in the Soulstone Sanctuaries, you're a little bit more mana hungry than the Mishra's Foundry version. But you have the 21 sources of black for the Bloodlighter of Aclazotz, so you're good there. This deck is favored against mono red aggro and Rakdos aggro. The thing that's also kind of hurting this win rate is it's a coin flip against Izzet Prowess. Izzet Prowess is more of a go wide strategy, so the 1-for-1 interaction or removal doesn't work as well against Izzet Prowess. It's also a coin flip against Azorius Control, since a lot of your cards are dead cards in that matchup, or at least difficult for them to find value. And then it is weak against Azorius Omniscience, and just having very few ways to actually disrupt the turn 4 combo. You can go for shooting the target that they go for with the Ablaze Awakening, but if they have a second Omniscience in hand, you're just kind of hosed. So as far as the opening hand, you're looking for Duress, Deep Cavern Bat, the Unholy Annex, and the Unstoppable Slasher. And this is what so when people have been complaining about a stale meta, this one I feel is a little bit more valid, considering 7 out of the 8 archetypes have not actually seen any changes since last week. And, you know, the only thing that we really got to talk about in Best of 1 is mono black midrange, and I wish Best of 3 was looking a little bit better, but as you'll see, we're seeing quite a bit of the same decks in Best of 3 as well. And if you've been a fan of the channel, you know that I'm a big advocate, a big fan of Wizards of the Coast, and I think they've done a pretty good job. I think that the additional tools that we saw for mono red and for Izzet Prowess maybe have been a little bit too much. We do have rotation right around the corner though, so it's really just going to be until the beginning of August, and then we're going to see a complete shift in the meta. So it may be problematic, but it's not going to be problematic for too long. But anyway, in the Pro Tour, we saw basically 3 decks. We saw Izzet Prowess, mono red aggro, and Azorius Omniscience. Azorius Omniscience was actually the most played deck, but did not make it into the top 8. And instead we have 4 versions of mono red aggro and 4 versions of Izzet Prowess. So the first one, the first place winner was mono red aggro by Kin Yukuhiro. Sorry if I massacred your name. Took down first place, and if we compare this one to last week, we can see that they didn't run the Opera Love Song, which was being explored in the Standard Challenge. We also see that they dropped the Witchstalker Frenzies, which have been kind of paired to shoot the Screaming Nemesis, and instead we're bringing in a additional copy of, or 1 copy of the Lightning Strike, and 1 copy of Tursa Light Shatter. So both of these we've seen kind of in other versions of mono red throughout the weeks. But what really makes this one unique and different than the other lists is deciding to run a full playset of Twin Maw Stormbrood and Charring Bite. So we're not playing any form of white, so it's just for the Charring Bite sorcery, which gives us 5 damage to target creature without flying. So it's kind of like a Scorching Shot, but instead of it just going away forever, goes back into your graveyard. And unless there's some way to create treasure in this list that I'm not seeing, I don't think there's a way to actually play the white side of it. But anyway, we will see Twin Maw Stormbrood made it into a couple of lists in the Pro Tour. And then we've got 1 copy of Self-Destruct, and this one was also being explored last week in the Standard Challenges, or the tournaments that I covered last week. And it works particularly nice with the Screaming Nemesis, being able to kind of double dip, since it deals 3 damage and then 3 damage to itself, which then deals 3 damage to your opponent. So it gives you like 6 damage in 1 card if you have the Screaming Nemesis in play. So congrats for the mono red win. I'm a big fan of mono red anyway, so I've got no complaints that it took down first place. As far as the best of 3 sideboard, we also see a couple of tweaks. So we've dropped 1 Sunspine Lynx. This one's a good tech card against like Domain or Esper Pixie, which was non-existent in the Pro Tour. We've got the one less Scorching Shot, which kind of makes sense because we're running a full playset of the Twin Maw Stormbrood. So we're dropping two copies of the Scorching Shot. We're dropping 2 Ghost Vacuums and 1 Witchstalker Frenzy. And we're bringing in the 2 copies of the Soul Guide Lantern. And this one being like a Ghost Vacuum, giving you the Graveyard Hate. Torch the Towers, we get 2 additional copies of Torch the Tower for against other mono red decks. And then we have Suplex, which is another way of kind of exiling problematic threats. So if you're coming up against anything like the Enduring Curiosity, I'm trying to think of other indestructible or recurring things that are nice to have the Suplex. But it's also like a Braid. Being able to exile an artifact is good for the Core Steel Cutter decks. All right, and then second place was Izzet Prowess with a full playset of Vivi Ornithir, which we got in Final Fantasy. And almost all of the lists of Izzet Prowess in the tournament were running it. I think there was one person who wasn't running Vivi, and they said it was just because it was too expensive. But this is fit into the archetype perfectly and is kind of what is the tipping point, in my opinion, about why Izzet Prowess is doing so much better. It's like it got additional tools, even though it was already in the #1 spot in a lot of people's minds. And so this is, I think, is the like part of the problem that's going on currently in Best of 3. And again, we'll see how things change during rotation. I'll be doing my rotation video probably in about a month or so, but I'll try to get you guys all ready for rotation. Just keep it in mind that it is coming down the line. So this version, if we this one was by Ian Robb, took down second place. And if we compare it to last week's list, we've got 1 less into the Floodmaw, still running 2, so just dropping 1. This is a particularly nice answer for the Temporary Lockdown, which is kind of the answer to this deck. But then with the temporary into the Floodmaw, you can just get your stuff back with the Temporary Lockdown. And we're also dropping 1 Mountain. We're dropping both copies of This Town Ain't Big Enough, which is another answer to the Temporary Lockdown. And then we're dropping both copies of the Thundertrap Trainer. And the Thundertrap Trainer kind of fits into just drawing additional resources. If you're going to have This Town Ain't Big Enough, it works better as a way to draw additional resources. So instead, we're bringing in an additional copy of Spell Pierce. This is also a good one to bring in against the sweepers. We've got a 4th copy of Torch the Tower for all the mono red. And then we've got 1 Thundering Falls, which is the Surveil land. And we've got 2 Wild Rides. Now, this one I haven't seen a lot. You can burst for a fair amount of damage because it gives you +3/+0, and it gains haste. So one of the downsides with the Temporary Lockdown is that if you do bounce it with the Into the Floodmaw, your creatures don't have haste. You will have haste off of the Core Steel Cutter, but this is a way to kind of get some of your big prowess creatures that don't have haste to have haste. And then you've got Harmonize, so you can get additional value off of that as well. Being able to double spell for Vivi can matter in some situations, right? And then we've also got the 4th copy of Vivi Ornithir. There's a debate about whether or not to run 3 or 4. This one running all 4. And the sideboard here, we've got 1 less Spell Pierce. Again, this is a nice one to bring in when you are up against those sweepers. 1 less Rebel Salvo, which is the like deal 5, but is affinity for artifacts, so it gets cheaper. Roaring Furnace, which is a removal spell that also gives you a mid-range dig. It's better for when you're trying to answer 1-for-1 removal with card draw. We've got 2 copies of the Soul Guide Lantern as the Graveyard Hate of choice, and we've got an additional copy of Unable to Scream. In my opinion, this is for the Screaming Nemesis in mono red. It's nice to have a nice 1-for-1 answer for that card, which can be difficult to deal with. And then we have 1 copy of Get Out, which gives us kind of the into the This Town Ain't Big Enough or Into the Floodmaw ability to bounce your own stuff. But you can also use it as just a straight counterspell. All right, the second version of Mono Red Aggro is by Yuchin Liu, who took down 4th place. And if we compare it to last week, we can see they dropped 1 Opera Love Song and brought in the Twin Maw Stormbrood. Oops, sorry, I appear to have the wrong list. Pump Fake. Okay, yeah, there's too many Mono Red ones. I pulled up the wrong one. So this one is the second version of Mono Red Aggro by Yuchin Liu. And if we can see, compare it to last week, we can see that they just dropped 1 Opera Love Song. which works, you know, the +2/+0 works pretty well with the mice synergies in this archetype. And they're deciding to run the one Twin Moth Stormbrood. And we've got, as far as the best of 3 sideboard goes, we've dropped the Case of the Crimson Pulse, which gives us kind of additional dig. Similar to the Steaming Sauna in Izzet Prowess, the Case of the Crimson Pulse is the way that you kind of answer if your opponent is trying to answer all of your stuff with removal. And then we've got 2 less on the Scorching Shot, as well as 2 less on the Ghost Vacuum, running a full playset of the Soul Guide Lantern, because again, the #1 most popular deck in the Pro Tour was Azorius Omniscience. And then we've got Obliterating Bolt instead of Suplex for a little bit of Exile hate, but no Artifact hate. And then we've got an additional copy of Torch the Tower for against other mono-red decks. The second version of Izzet Prowess was by Tony Portalon, took down 4th place. And if we compare this one to last week, we see that they've dropped a Monstrous Rage, an Island, all 3 copies of the Drake Hatcher, the 2 copies of This Town Ain't Big Enough, as well as the 2 copies of the Thunder Trap Trainer. And we're running a Spell Pierce in the main, and all 4 copies of the Monastery Swiftspear to give us some more bodies. We've got the Thundering Falls Surveil land, similar to the list that took down second place. And then we've got an additional copy of Into the Floodmoss, so running a full playset there for against the temporary lockdowns. And then we also have the 2 copies of the Wild Ride that we also saw in the other list. And then as far as the best of 3 sideboard, we've got 1 less Abrade, 2 less Spell Pierce, 1 less Rebel Salvo, and 2 less Lithomanic Barrage. And then we've got the 1 additional copy of Negate. This is sort of like Spell Pierce. It's good against the White Sweepers. We've got the 1 copy of Soul Guide Lantern for a little bit of Graveyard hate. This one going for a 1/1 split with Ghost Vacuum to also give us some Graveyard hate. Bringing in the 3rd copy of Unable to Scream for the Screaming Nemesis. And I just realized that Unable to Scream and Screaming Nemesis. Maybe they meant to build those 2 cards together, huh? And then we've got Get Out, like the list before, and then this one's bringing in Dissection Tools. And Dissection Tools is gives you the lifelink, which can allow you to stabilize against mono red. So kind of like this one if you need something that's like kind of in that mid-rangey but life stabilization sort of area. All right, now we're to the list I pulled up before. This is the 3rd mono red aggro by Percy Fang. So these were now the top 8, and if we compare this one to week 1, we see that they dropped all 4 copies of the Opera Love Song, and instead is running the 2 copies of the Monastery Swiftspear and the Witchstalker Frenzy at a full playset, and then 1 additional copy of the Mage Bane Lizard. And this is kind of the standard deck, if you will, for best of 3 prior to the release of Final Fantasy. And the sideboard, we're dropping the Case of the Crimson Pulse, as well as the 2 Scorching Shots, and the Witchstalker Frenzy, and the Mage Bane Lizard, and because it's been moved to the main, to bring in an additional copy of the Lithomanic Barrage. And so this person thought that it was actually good to have the Lithomanic Barrage. Curious, I wonder why. Maybe because of Jeskai Control or something like that. If you know in the comments below, let me know. Always love discussing Magic, that's why I do this. We also have a full playset of Torch the Tower for the mono-red matchups. We have an additional copy of Ghost Vacuum for a little bit of Graveyard hate. And then we have the 1 copy of the Twin Moth Stormbrood, which seems to be the new Scorching Shot of choice. The 3rd copy of Izzet Prowess was by Christian Baker, took down the top 8. We dropped a Monstrous Rage, a Vivi Ornator, the 3 copies of Drake Hatcher, as well as the 2 Thunder Trap Trainers for 1 copy of Abrade, giving you the Graveyard hate for the mirror match. Because I think it was widely speculated that Izzet Prowess was going to be the most popular archetype in the Pro Tour. And then we also have 1 copy of Roaring Furnace Steaming Sauna in the main, which I thought was an interesting choice. And then we have 3 copies of the Astrologian's Planisphere, and this is a new artifact equipment that we got in Final Fantasy. It is spawns a 1/1, and then the equipped creature becomes a wizard, and then whenever you cast a non-creature spell, and whenever you draw your 3rd card each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So you can kind of, create a large threat. I was curious to see if this was going to get any play alongside Vivi, and happy to see it in the top 8. And the sideboard, we got a cut and a braid because it's in the main. We cut 1 Ral Crackling Wit, which is kind of an answer to the mono white or to the White Sweepers. We dropped a Rebel Salvo. We dropped the 2 copies of the Roaring Furnace, one which moved to the main. And then we have 3 less Spell Pierce. So this one, just keeping 1 in the main, but not running them in the sideboard. And then we've got 2 Enduring Curiosities. And so this person is leaning a little bit more heavily into the idea of card drawing if your opponent has a bunch of removal. And we've also got 2 Get Outs and 1 Twin Maw, 1 Fire Magic, and this one is kind of a sweeper. So it gives you the what's that called? Pyromancy. You know, the 2 damage to everything, but you can pay 6 to deal 3 damage to everything. So or you can just pay 1 to deal 1 damage to everything. So interesting for the mirror match where you're up against a bunch of like 1/1 prowesses that on your turn are going to be smaller. And then we've got Vivi, the third copy of Vivi in the sideboard, where you'd bring it in if you feel like they're less likely to have a clean answer for the Vivi. All right, and the 4th and final Izzet Prowess that we'll talk about was by David Rude, and we dropped 1 This Town Ain't Big Enough, but is keeping 1 here, dropping 1 Thunder Trap Trainer, but keeping the other one. We've got 1 less Vivi, and then 1 less Mountain. And we're bringing in the Spell Pierce in the main, which seems to be standard across the board. I think all 4 copies had, I think, 1 Spell Pierce in the main. We have 4 copies of Torch the Tower, anticipating mono red. We have a 4th copy of Drake Hatcher, which I think works pretty well against mono red and Izzet Prowess. Obviously worse if you're up against Azorius Omniscience. And then 1 additional Mountain. And the best of 3 sideboard, we have 1 less Abrade, 2 less Spell Pierce, 1 less Rebel Salvo, 2 less Roaring Furnace, Steaming Sauna, and instead we're bringing in an additional copy of Disdainful Stroke. I thought this was kind of an interesting choice because we didn't see a whole lot of Domain in for the Pro Tour, and I think this card, typically my brain goes to Domain, because like if you can counter Abuelo's Awakening, as somebody pointed out, in Azorius Omniscience, but you could just run Negate then, and then you would also be able to hit spells that are smaller, right? So this one, for me, it usually targets something that has a creature side as well, and works well if you're up against that kind of Beans deck that's trying to get value off of spells that cost 5 or more. Anyway, we've got 1 Soul Guide Lantern for a little bit Graveyard Hate. We've got an additional Lithomantic Barrage. So there must be some matchup that's really good for the Lithomantic Barrage that I'm just not completely aware of. I mean, I guess it could be good against the mirror match if you're like sniping like Drake Hatchers and things like that. I hadn't really thought about that. Anyway, let me know in the comments below where you like the Lithomantic Barrage. And then we've got This Town Ain't Big Enough in the sideboard. We've got Twin Maw, Stormbrood, and then we've got the 3rd copy of the Vivi in the sideboard. All right, and then last but not least is Mono Red Aggro by Andy Garcia Romo, who took down to top 8 as well. And if we compare it to last week, we see that they dropped all 4 copies of the Opera Love Song, and instead of running the 2 copies of the Monastery Swiftspear, as well as the Witchstalker Frenzy at a full playset, and then running the 1 Scorching Shot. So really similar to the list above it. The Scorching Shot was replaced with a, what was it? A Magebane Lizard, I think? Yeah, the 4th copy of the Magebane Lizard. So practically the same list as Percy Fang. And then for the best of 3 sideboard, we've got it's quite a bit more. Yeah, we've dropped 2 Scorching Shots and 1 Witchstalker Frenzy to bring in a 3rd copy of the Lithomantic Barrage, and then 2 additional copies of the Torch the Tower for the mono red matchups. So all in all, pretty similar to what we were seeing in the standard challenge prior to the actual Pro Tour. And I hope this gives you plenty of ideas of what to do for Izzet Prowess and mono red. But you definitely see this is, by the way, this week, I'm going to say it, I said it at the beginning, I'll say it again. This is the sort of thing that showcases that the meta is not in a particularly great place, right? I've been doing this for a long time now. I've been doing this for I don't know, 2 years or something like that. And this is the first time that I felt like it's this repetitive. And this reminds me of what it used to be like back in the day, right? Like, people would complain about the meta, and I would always be like, well, I've played Standard when it was one deck, right? And we're starting to feel a little bit more like that in Best of 3. But again, rotation is right around the corner, so I don't think it's going to be a long-term problem. And I'm sure they are aware of the imbalance with the Pro Tour results. So hopefully next week we see a little bit more Final Fantasy creep into Best of 1, and maybe we'll see some bans. It's very possible they'll do some bans prior to rotation. It depends on how loud everyone complains. So thanks for joining me this week. Hope you enjoyed it. Remember, this is brought to you by viewers like you. So if you want to help support the cause, the best way to do that is become a YouTube member or subscribe to my Twitch, something like that. You can always drop by on the Discord if you want to come say hi and throw out some ideas. Tomorrow will be the community deck tech, so if you want my thoughts on your builds for Final Fantasy, submission should be open tomorrow. And yeah, we'll just keep it on. Magic's still enjoyable. Oh, one last side note. Final Fantasy has been really good in limited. I don't know, I always keep this kind of constructed focused, but I do draft a lot, and I usually do about 3 drafts a day. And I've been really enjoying the Final Fantasy as a draft set. So if you're not really liking Best of 3 or you're not really liking Best of 1, I really encourage you to check out limited if it's available to you. It can be a little bit expensive resources wise, but anyway, I've rambled enough. Good luck in your RCQs, good luck climbing the ladder, and I will catch you all on Sunday for the Meta Breakers. Take care.